Call to order the informal meeting of the Johnson County Board of Supervisors for September 3rd, 2015. First item of business is Community Identification Study Phase 1. Nicole Novak and Sergio Aradawan, hope I got that right, here with us this morning to give a presentation. Good morning.
Morning. Thanks for listening to us this morning. I'm Nicole. I'm a PhD student in public health at the University of Michigan. I'm from Iowa City, and I have been a visiting student here at Iowa since January.
I'm Sergio Aradawan, and I'm with the Center for Worker Justice.
And you guys already know plenty about the community ID, but what we're here today to talk about is a study that I've initiated in partnership with the Center for Worker Justice and the Auditor's Office to look at the effect of the community ID on people who are able to access it. And so I would like to share just our results from the first round of it. It's important to realize that this is just kind of the baseline, and then in November we'll follow up after people have been able to use the ID for a few months and see how it's going for them. But today we can talk about who applied for the ID, what they were hoping for from it, and what their experience had been like before getting it. To tell you a bit about why we want to study it, I guess there's a few reasons. We were just talking about it before we came. First of all, Johnson County is an innovator in having a community ID, and you probably know that there's a lot of other people who want to do this and are watching you. And I happened to be lucky enough to be living in the two places in the Midwest that started community IDs this summer. So the other one was Washtenaw County, Michigan. So this is actually a two-site study.
Well, so you're a good luck charm. I hope you don't move, though, to keep this going.
I'll just keep living in both places, actually. So it's just a cool opportunity to watch two Midwestern counties start a program like this, and then get to share that experience with other places, all throughout the country that are excited about it. And so, today we'll be talking about what we've learned so far, and then we'd like to ask for your input about ways we can, things you'd like to know when we do our follow-up component, and, pieces of the program design that might be helpful for talking to other counties. So there's kind of two data sources we'll be using today. One, you saw me enter all of this in the auditor's office. We got permission to enter de-identified application form data. So this is anyone who applied for an ID. I didn't use any names or date of birth, anything like that. But just to know, who they were, how many were they, and what kind of documents were people using to apply for their ID. And then also, this might be familiar to you, that little photo, the group of us who sat down there for a few weeks doing a survey and interviews with people who were applying for ID. So we have data on 524 applicants and then 157 people who additionally did the survey.
I would just add something. The number, I don't know how many people have applied so far. This is the number that she has on this PowerPoint, but
Sergio, I think you're going to have to speak a little more into your mic.
Sorry, the number could increase. We've been trying to get a hold of with the Mexican consulate so they can come in and then issue the consular ID for the Mexican community here, but it has been very difficult. So we've been talking to Congressman Lupzak's office to see if they can invite them to come here. A couple months ago, they were in Davenport. I think they just do randomly. They go to places randomly. So I don't know why they do that, but we would like to see them here, and so they can help us.
So that means that without that consular ID, certain people don't have enough paperwork to even get our ID.
Yes.
That's correct.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's a barrier for a lot of people. And you were there helping people put their documents together, and us too down there. There are a lot of people who wanted the ID who didn't quite meet the criteria.
Can you, so I didn't quite understand these two numbers. The 524 are people who applied.
Everyone who applied.
The 120
During that period of time.
That period of time.
So
and then I invited anyone who applied for the ID to also participate in this study. And that was when we collected more information from them.
So
of
the
the
157 are people that you actually did the interviews with?
Yeah, and they're included in the 524.
They're part of the 524?
Yep, so we kind of
Okay.
have, the big picture, and then we got more in-depth stuff that I'll show you what we were able to
Okay.
collect by actually talking to people. And a cool kind of synergy was that we were able to get a small grant to give people $10 to thank them for participating in the study. So that was a way to help people with the cost of the ID if they had time to take the study.
So County Auditor Weipert is behind you, and I was just trying to get a feel for your data set of 524. How many community IDs are we up to, Travis?
Travis Weipert, County Auditor. We're right around the 600 number, and as I came up here, we had one at the counter going through the process now. So it's,
So
I think every day we're getting one or two.
But
It
524,
hasn't stopped.
you've captured the data, most of the,
Well, I mean, the thing to think about too is how are people who applied right off the bat different than people who are going to keep applying over time,
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily representative of everyone who needs an ID, but it tells us who got it in that first, 3 weeks of issuing IDs.
Thank you, Travis.
And so, yeah, there's a ton of information we collected, and we're trying to keep it brief today, but if you have questions, we can talk about a lot more within this. So just summing up from the 524, do you want to take this part?
Yeah, I personally, I've been to stores. Let's say I went to a gas station right here by Kmart, and there was an Indian gentleman working there, and I showed him the ID, and he didn't know what it was. And I explained to him, and he said, I have a lot of immigrants and Latin, they come to my store, but because they don't have an ID, I don't sell them anything. It was very interesting, and he said, my community doesn't know about this. Mm-hmm. And he was very happy when I said, there are discounts, stores and businesses that will give discounts. That's where he said, I'm going to talk to my community and see if we can get that because we like the discount. Like I say, we can do a better job telling people, informing people about the community ID because there's a lot of people that never heard of it. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that we can work on that. And also people are using them already. I've used it a few times. I have friends that work with me. They have used that, especially cashing the check. A lot of Latin friends that I have, they don't trust the bank system. I don't know why. I've told them, the ID you can get a bank account in some places, some banks you can get it, but they rather go and cash their check. But they're using them, and I have also family friends that I've used in the museum, children's museum. So that's a good sign. I think as time goes on, we'll have more people utilizing the IDs.
Yeah, I think, and we have a few slides that'll help support that. So just as a general summary, we have an incredibly diverse group of people who have already applied for IDs, ranging in age from 2 to 95, from over 10 different countries, and from throughout Johnson County.
Can I ask a question
Yeah.
about the throughout Johnson County?
Yeah.
Now, my guess is you captured that by using zip code or something?
I wrote
Okay.
down just the zip code of application.
Because my guess is a lot of that 77% actually live in what's technically unincorporated Johnson County in some of the mobile home parks
That might be.
and aren't actually official residents of the city of Iowa City. That would be my guess.
And would I be able to tell that from the zip?
No.
Okay.
You'd have to have the address.
You-
Yeah, and I wasn't gonna record
You'd need
anything
the auditor's
identifying.
office to, but they could probably take that data and figure it
But-
out.
Yeah, with our
You
yes,
guys,
that'd be-
would that be possible, Travis?
I
that-
believe we could.
That your office
I mean,
produces
if
that
if that
number?
would be helpful information to you.
Well, I think it'd go to the point of, when we first started talking, community started talking about an Iowa City ID, we quickly realized that that wasn't gonna be that helpful.
You needed county.
Because a lot of the communities that particularly need an ID, as opposed to want an ID. I wanted an ID. I didn't necessarily need an ID.
Yeah.
Lived in the unincorporated area or in other cities. So I get why the auditor's office didn't want to give you addresses, but I think they could work with our GIS department, and there's probably a way that Rick Hovel can do that without human power. I don't know how that
Yeah,
works.
I'm sure we can go to the post office and get a map of where each zip code is, and then overlay that onto one of our maps, so tell with the city limits.
I think it'd be, call Rick,
You got
ask
the
Rick.
voting layer on there already. I think you could probably plug it in. you
Yeah,
know.
the big thing is we'd have to know where the zip code districts are, which would probably have to
right.
come from the post office, but yeah, then we just layer it on with what we have.
I
and-
don't, ask Rick Hovel at
Yeah.
RGIS, because I think he can just take all the addresses and our GIS would plot it out on, tell you.
And then he could put the city boundaries on there, yeah, and we'd know.
I think he
Yeah.
could tell you how many are unincorporated.
Yeah, if that would be helpful.
It is
That'd be great.
actually a bit of data that I think we'd like to know.
Okay, great. Yeah, we can definitely work on that. And kind of speaking, I'm still working on the terminology for this. I don't think I've quite hit it right, but you mentioned the difference between people who need an ID and want an ID. I think the main thing is we want to think about the ID as just something that's valuable for anyone who's a resident of the county, but there are reasons to try to think about, what is the experience of people who haven't yet had a locally accepted ID versus not. So for this, we talked about it this morning. For now, I'm calling it allies, which are maybe people who have a locally valid ID, but got this in addition. And then about 65% are people who, for today, I'm calling primary ID users, people who were expecting this will be their primary locally accepted ID. And so I made that distinction just based on the documents they used to apply. And then we can kind of look at how people differed. The allies tended to be a little bit older on average than the people who were going to be primary ID users. And then we actually saw more than half men in the people who are primary ID users. This is what we were talking about a minute ago about who's applying for ID. And you can see that this is just number of applications per day. You can see that launch day, which amazingly was only half a day of ID administration, and there were already 154 people that first day. And then as Auditor Weipert mentioned, there's still several people per day, but I think what Sergio and I were speaking about this morning is that there's lots of people out there who could probably benefit from this program who haven't heard about it. And if you look at on this left side, how did people hear about the ID? You could list more than one.
So
But-
this data now is who you surveyed.
This is from my survey, yeah, thank
Okay.
you, thank you. So now I'm switching over to that more detailed information I was able to collect. And you can see that, 70% of people heard about it through informal networks, as opposed to hearing about it through the news or, some sort of formal channel. So that might mean to us that there's whole networks of people who just haven't gotten tapped into yet who might benefit from it. Just something to think about, because it's a really valuable program, and it will be more valuable for more people the broader its appeal is, So there's a report from NYU that 11% of U.S. adult citizens do not have government-issued photo ID. So that might be one group to think about. It helps everyone, even those who don't qualify for local government ID. If people like that, people who are maybe residentially unstable, who have lost documents, if they're also people who are getting the ID, that will help everyone be able to use it more safely.
So that last data you just said, 11%,
Yeah.
you used the term U.S. citizens. Did
Citizens.
you mean U.S.
No,
residents?
I meant citizens. I can send you the paper if you'd like. They actually did it for the purposes of talking about Voter ID Act.
Sure.
But yeah, it's really helpful to think about, who are the people who actually are eligible for state ID but can't get it for a number of reasons. And that might be a group of people that we could think about reaching out to more
Interesting.
here.
Thanks.
The purpose of this slide is how many years have people lived in Johnson County, just to emphasize that these are not all newcomers. A lot of people have been here for years and are going to be using this as their primary form of identification. So if you look in that last column, a third of primary ID users have been in Johnson County for more than 10 years. 80.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I've
Yeah.
been here since 2001, and I went to school here, played soccer with a lot of friends, good friends, that never had an ID. They just went about their lives without an ID. And at the time, early 2000s, as a student, you wonder, how can somebody not have an ID? If you're stopped by the police and all, or you want to, use your credit card to buy something in the store, I mean, how do you move on your life like that? So I think today, I mean, now with this, we've reached a good point, but we just need to talk to people and tell them more about the ID so they can come and get it. Because that will be very helpful for all of us.
Yeah, and I think
that's
there's
enough.
people who have been living and working, been part of our community for that long. It's exciting to finally be able to.
Yeah, I think to me, the hard part of this is that you have individuals, like you said, they're citizens, but yet they're working, they don't have an ID, and they're not paying into Social Security, so they really have no benefits for the future, and they're really going missing out in the long run, in the end.
Well, one of the things I think now is that our outreach program, we need to, the 600 people is a great start, but there's so many more people that need it. So Lynette Jacoby is sitting behind you there, and so every point of contact that we have with people in social services, there maybe on that counter should be a brochure about community ID. And maybe thinking outside the box and get those, a small brochure out in the community, at grocery stores, at wherever people that could use a community ID might show up in public and maybe be able to use one. Maybe we could have a small little display and a stack of brochures to help people get these community IDs, so this number of 600 could multiply.
That's a good idea. And thinking too about churches and other kind of trusted spaces where
Yes.
you could help people learn about it in a place where they feel safe. Just important to realize a lot of people are raising kids without ID, so this is another way that we're hoping it will make life easier for them. This is really the meat of the survey part. I think you guys have it in your packet.
Yeah, it's on our computers.
Yeah, and I want to kind of keep moving, but I think, this is what we'll be following up on in November, is, what are so that you can see this top bar in each section is, have you ever been discriminated against for not having ID in said situation? Have you ever avoided that situation because of worrying about not having ID? And then where do you plan to use your ID in that situation? And I sorted it by, where people plan to use it, to just think about, what are people excited about having this ID for? And so identifying themselves to police, which is, one of the primary goals of the program is the top one. But then looking at these other, cashing checks, as Sergio mentioned, getting bank accounts, applying for housing. And just looking at the before, the day people were applying, over half are saying that they had trouble interacting with police, that over half have talked about trying to avoid interacting with police if they can help it. So hopefully, in November, we'll follow up and see, have we seen any change in some of these, just day-to-day stressors people were encountering because of not having ID. So yeah, this is dense, but please take a look, and if you have any questions about it. The second page is, it's sorted, so we're getting down to the ones where fewer people were endorsing planning to use it in that situation, but you can still see high numbers of people talking about, avoiding applying for certain jobs, avoiding making purchases at certain points because of worrying about not having ID. And this is my favorite part, I guess, just the quotes from people. And so this is among the what we call the primary ID users asking why they were getting their ID. And I think the cool thing to notice is, on this page we talk about first, the real practical use of the ID. So this first person saying, I'm going to open a bank account, talk to the police. Next person talking about going to the pharmacy to get allergy medicine, things that you need as a parent with kids in school. And then as you move out, there's not just those practical things, but also just that idea of, day to day not having to worry so much about, are they going to take my ID in this situation or not? And then as you keep going, it gets even broader. The things people were reading into this idea, it's really powerful as, a symbolic thing. So this ID, people are applying for it because they want to be part of the community, they want their voice to be heard. And then even, bigger level, like dignity and respect, that when you've been rejected before for not having an ID, it makes you feel like people are rejecting you as a person. Or that the idea is this really powerful message of inclusion to people, that this guy said it affirms that we are people. So that's a cool thing about this program. I think it's very exciting. And then looking at, allies, and again, I don't want to reinforce this division too much because I think the point is that anybody can benefit from the county ID, but the reasons people might be getting it even if they already had a state ID. We had a young man whose parents applied, and he has permanent resident status here, but his parents didn't, so he got it to support them. People who have done, years of advocacy for this program and were excited to celebrate by getting their ID. And then I actually really like this last one at the bottom. Somebody just plain old was excited about the discounts, which I think is a really good sign. If the idea has appealed to you, regardless of your interest in those issues, that helps, just get it out there, get people seeing it. And then at the end of the survey, we asked people what's the first thing they want to do with their ID, which is partly a fun question, but also ended up being pretty powerful too for just talking about, what it meant to people. So people talking about wanting to shop in stores, talk to the police, give thanks to God and get a bank account, Children's Museum, as Sergio mentioned. And then on that second point, again, this is what I study in public health, is like chronic activation of a stress response, and thinking about this idea as like a public health intervention, as something that protects you from being so stressed out, or from being as stressed out all the time. So people just talking about feeling better with it on their person, I won't be so scared going about my business if I have it. I really liked this. This is from an ally, a man who had a lot of people in his network who might need the ID, and he was going to go out and try it everywhere he could, even though he didn't need it himself personally, to kind of test it out for his networks. And then people excited to support businesses, which is something you guys were talking about just a few minutes ago. So those are our results from here. I wanted to just mention briefly a few things that I saw in Michigan that you guys might be interested in. There were just so many commonalities and then so many differences between the two. One thing that was...
Can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
You said this was which county in Michigan?
Washtenaw County, Michigan. It's where Ann Arbor is.
Okay.
So it's actually in a lot of ways very comparable to Iowa
That's what I
City.
was wondering.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
It's about more than twice the size of Johnson County, but similar in a lot of other ways. So they had different ways you applied there, which had advantages and disadvantages, but they had something called a 300-point system. So I can also send that to you guys if you're interested. Whereas here you could have a passport, and that was enough to get you through. There you would often have to have something in addition to a passport, because a passport was 200 of your 300 points. But then there were some other things on it that made it a little more accessible to people who might have been part of that 11% U.S. citizens who fell through the cracks. So you could have like letters from your social worker, or you could have actually an affidavit. You could have someone come in with you and swear that you are the person you say they are. So, it was just different, and I think we'll see, different ways that it works for different communities. One thing I did see there is that a lot more people who are homeless were able to get the ID, which is an important group of people that often, if you've been residentially unstable or had your stuff stolen, you don't have your ID. So that's one thing that was cool there. Some things that didn't work as well there is it was a lot more expensive, so you had a lot fewer allies applying for the ID, because if you didn't desperately need it, $25 was a lot. And they didn't have discounts at local businesses, which I think was really cool here. That helped a lot. There's a lot more I could say about Michigan if you're curious, but I just wanted to comment briefly on a few of those things. And I do think that making it available to people who are homeless or residentially unstable is really important if we can. And it's also a big issue in Johnson County at this moment. I know there were lots of discussions and people worked very hard on figuring it out, so I don't mean to downplay any of that, but.
No, that feedback is important, that we can make it better and more accessible, free lunch program, emergency shelters where the homeless people are getting services. This would be great to, if we haven't already, do outreach at those places.
Yeah, and I think the issue was partly the address. I know you guys have talked about this a lot.
And I'm not saying that we can't figure out a way, but the initial concerns about it is the integrity of the system.
Yeah.
That we know that this is Janelle, and that the county could prove that that was Janelle at the time they did the ID. And two, being able to mail it back gave us integrity in the system. And Shelter House expressed a concern of being the address for everybody who was homeless. And so, as opposed to delay this till we could figure out another way to do this, I believe it was okay to go forward. But now it's time, in a month or two, when the county attorney's office and Travis have gotten through a couple of elections, is to say, is there another way we could do this to allow more people to have this?
Yeah.
And still protect the integrity of the system?
Yeah, and that's, I'd be happy to be part of those conversations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
your experience would be valuable as we have those conversations.
Well, and I can put you in touch with the people in Michigan who were kind of analogous to the work that CWJ did here, have years more experience than I do.
And
with
I
this.
think that's perfectly fine to have an additional conversation once we've rolled out the first
Absolutely.
huge batch, and then say, we're missing some people who definitely need this, so how do we protect integrity and still do this? And I think that's a conversation worth having.
Yeah, and that's something we were talking about too, is in addition to people who are residentially unstable, people who, don't have their consular ID, things like that. So we can maybe work together to think about some of those gaps.
And then,
How long has Michigan been doing this?
They just started this summer as well.
They did as well.
Yep. So you guys are the first two in the Midwest. It's very exciting.
yeah, Terrence is gonna ask, did we beat them to it, or?
I won't comment.
As long as
So-
we're first in Iowa, that's something. Yeah.
So,
Oh, no, it's a huge,
I used my ID the other day at the cell phone shop.
Yeah.
Because, you give them the last four of your social and your address and whatever, and then, if you're gonna buy a phone and walk out without having paid anything, they actually kind of want to know that you're actually who you are.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, this will get interesting, because I've been a customer for 23 years. And so I just gave them my community ID.
You had a cell phone for 23 years?
Yeah, in '92. So
Must have been big.
Yeah, it was a car. It was a car phone, a bag phone. I still have it.
Handle.
I'm gonna have a historic site of every cell phone I've ever owned. So I thought this will get interesting, because this is a young guy, probably hasn't read a newspaper, he reads everything online, and I'm curious how this is gonna go.
yeah.
And I'm like, do I really want to battle? I just wanted out of the cell phone shop. You've been there forever. And I'm like, do I really want to battle driver's license, community ID? And then I just thought, if I'm not going to do this,
Yep.
because I'm lazy or tired or just want out of here. So I give him my community ID and I don't say a word. And he picks it up and looks at it and kind of cocks his head, doesn't say a word, and hands it back to me and gives me my whatever $800 phone, whatever these things cost these days, with no penny, no money, And I just thought, okay,
That's
we're
exciting.
making a difference here. I don't know if I was the first. I don't know if he just thought, I'm not going to battle with this woman. I don't know what he thought. But I'd be curious if someone who didn't look like me came in and did the same thing, what would happen?
Yeah, and that's the question, I think, and that's why we're excited to call everyone in November. So we'll call, both people who already had an ID and people who it's going to be their primary ID, and ask, how is it going? Where has it worked? Where have you encountered problems? Why do you think you had those problems? Try to, and then we can maybe come back to you and talk about, where are those gaps?
Yeah,
Well, and I think it's important for those of us who are allies, as you've defined us,
Yeah,
who are carrying a driver's license, who have a passport, whatever, to use it.
yeah, absolutely.
Because then if I say, well, then I'm not going to buy your widget at your store because of your credit card, and, chain stores take your credit card and then want an ID often. This is my ID. If you don't want it, then you just didn't make the sale. And if people who are allies start doing that, then they're going to have to start accepting it. But that had been my one experience where I was the only person who's asked me for an ID since.
Well, and that's part of the trouble is, I think people who really need the ID are getting asked for ID a lot more than people who don't necessarily need it as much. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good point. Allies need to use that more.
yeah.
Because I remember the Indian guy, when I showed him the ID, he said, it was kind of is this a real ID? Until I explained to him, and even asked me, are you illegal? I said, what, this is, you see, this is Johnson County map there. Yeah, I see it. And then he understood.
So you can't buy gas if you're not documented? Is that the...
He just, I think that's what it is sometimes, maybe. If you're
Well,
kind
We
of
had a
person
lot
like
of
that.
stories of people saying they just weren't allowed to make a purchase.
Well, that's the thing that was really disheartening in your slides was, there were several of those gray lines that were, 30, 40, 50% of the people saying that they had been discriminated against at some point.
Yeah,
That's a terrible number.
yep.
So, if we can do anything to lower that.
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you, it works in Wisconsin.
You used it there?
So, yeah, whenever you do get some cash, typically you show the bank person your photo ID. And then if you go to Wisconsin and you leave your little package of envelope of money that still has that ID at home, you don't have your driver's license. But I did have my community ID in my wallet, and so when I was able to go to a gas station to make a purchase with my credit card and they asked for my ID, I just showed them that and they didn't say a word. So
That's good.
it does work even in another state, at
Yeah.
least.
Good. Beyond our expectations.
We're not even
Or at
going to
least a credit
explore
card.
the issue that you drove to Wisconsin without your
No,
driver's license.
no. Actually, when I figured it out, Amy drove. So we actually got out because I didn't have my driver's license with me.
I used it.
So I made her drive all the way there and all the way back.
I put it in the front of my wallet, in front of my driver's license. So that's the first ID I pull out. Yeah, it's the default, and I've used it at one of the local banks, and I've used it a couple other times. Unfortunately, I carry like 5 credit cards in my wallet, and I don't sign any of them. I put check ID.
Yeah.
When you use a credit card, they rarely check your ID, and that's very disappointing to me from a security standpoint, because I want them to check my ID. But when they do ask, I show them the community ID, so.
Yeah.
Well, I think this data is really important, and if Travis can work with GIS and break the Iowa City out, I think we would find that interesting, because I bet we're gonna find there's more unincorporated residents than that shows.
That's probably true.
But thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank
And
you.
whoever your professor is, should give you a good grade.
Thank you. Well, I did want to just go through and thank our study partners, because this was a big group of people working together. So our primary study partner is the Center for Worker Justice. So Sergio here is the Community ID Coordinator. Misty is here behind me, the Executive Director. And just earlier, Mazahir was here, the Vice President. And then the auditor's office, everybody in the office helped me a lot as we tried to, get the whole thing underway. And then obviously I was so lucky to get to just show up here and study a program after people had worked for years to get it into place. So we want to acknowledge those folks. And then everyone who participated in the study. Folks at University of Iowa who helped with the study. We have faculty and this Health Equity Advancement Lab there. And then lastly, this is our partners in Michigan, which I can, put anyone in touch with if you're interested, who are kind of the analogous group to CWJ there. And then my friends at University of Michigan who are doing the other branch of the study there. And the grant that helped us give people the $10 was from my research group at Michigan. So thank you guys so much. And I'll send some materials along to Andy maybe that you could.
Well, so I had a question about that. Can we either put your study up on our website or link to your study somehow?
Is it on public health yet?
What?
Is it on public health?
The study? I'm an epidemiology PhD student. Yeah. So you can, the slides from today I think are already up under the
So
meeting.
do we have your permission to put that on our community ID webpage?
I think, let me check, but yeah, that should be fine. Just do it. Yeah, that's fine.
I mean, you just showed it on TV and
Yeah,
on the internet.
That's true. Go ahead and do that. And then we'll continue to have a lot of materials we're developing. So yeah,
Because
definitely when we have, formal publications, you can.
I think if we
those
put
up.
this on our webpage, we can link to it in our Twitter feed and whatnot, and it just gives more exposure to the data you've
Right?
created.
Yeah. I think that'd be very cool. Yeah.
Good, thank you for the
Nicole,
reports.
it was just so great seeing you down there for weeks, and just the hard work you put into this. It was kismet, the timing of this, that we were doing this, they were doing it in Michigan, and you were here. to study it. It was,
Thank
the
you.
stars aligned, and I really thank you for your hard work on this, because I think those numbers are going to be so valuable as we move forward.
I hope so. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, folks.
You guys help.